not the kind of cops that interfere in elections, or pepper spray water protectors, or truncheon miners. No Orgreave inquiry. No, the kind that are supposed to prevent our planet going extra crispy. The 22nd Conference of the Parties took place in Marrakesh in Morocco from the 7th to the 18th of November. One highlight was the dire warning from outgoing Secretary of State John Kerry to President-elect Donald Trump to lay off attempts to scuttle the Paris Agreement, which came into law on November 4th.
No one has a right to make decisions that affect billions of people based on solely ideology or without proper input. Anyone who has these conversations, who takes the time to learn from these experts, who gets the full picture of what we're facing, I believe they can only come to one legitimate decision, and that is to act boldly on climate change and encourage others to do the same.
Of course, Kerry voted for the invasion of Iraq and against ratifying the Kyoto Treaty on global warming. Here's a quote from COP21 in Paris last year, set to a montage of his recent trip to Antarctica.
The fact is that even if every single American citizen biked to work, carpooled to school, used only solar panels to power their homes, if we each planted a dozen trees, if we somehow eliminated all of our domestic greenhouse gas emissions, guess what? That still wouldn't be enough to offset the carbon pollution coming from the rest of the world. If all the industrial nations went down to zero emissions, remember what I just said, all the industrial nations went down to zero emissions, it wouldn't be enough.
The ham-fisted point Kerry was trying to make is that action against climate change is required by all of humankind and not just the relatively well-off. The charming notion that we're all in it together is just so much roadkill when we consider the predatory and cancerous nature of the current economic system. Expand or die, baby. Let's pause for thought. thought that springs to mind is why Jeremy Corbyn only wore a red poppy. It's to his credit that he's appointed a Minister for Peace and Disarmament, but where was the symbolism at the cenotaph to back that up? Anyway, enough about poppies and back to the BBC's initial comments on enacting the Paris Agreement. Here's Aaron Heselhurst speaking on BBC World News, November 4th.
The pledge is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above what it was before the Industrial Revolution. Already there are warnings this ain't going to be achievable. It is a massive task. Let me give you an idea of the scale of it. This is the first ever global treaty on climate change agreed by 195 countries at a meeting in Paris last December. Now, to come into force, 55 countries representing 55% of global emissions had to sign off on it. Well, as of Thursday, 94 countries have signed off the deal, representing 2/3 of the world's emissions. Now, the big players, China, the United States and India, have all agreed, they've done it, they've ratified. Together, they make up 42% of global emissions. However, US presidential candidate Donald Trump has threatened to pull out of the deal if elected. Rich countries, they are supposed to provide funding to poorer ones to help them deal with climate change and to shift to, well, green energy, at least $100 billion a year by 2020. Now, there are huge questions around how this is going to work, though. One report estimates that 20 times that amount could actually be needed. And to meet the Paris goal, investment in clean energy will be required on a, well, let's be frank, it's on a vast scale. The UN body, the International Energy Agency, puts that figure at $16.5 trillion over the next 15 years.
No Churchillian rhetoric there. It's all but impossible. So let's do some math. $16.5 trillion invested by 2030 leaves us a rough average of $1.18 trillion a year. The good news is the world is already spending more than that on weapons. 2015 saw a whopping military spend of $1.77 trillion. So all we have to do is give peace a chance, have every country in the world cut its military budget by 2/3, and the job's a good un. Or put it another way, that's just over $3.2 billion a day. A lot less than the $18 billion that Chinese online giant Alibaba generated this Armistice Day. Yes, everyone, let's go shop for peace. And that's Trex News. Exceedingly extinct.